Like I would consider investing in a place like San Diego, the major leagues of real estate investing. Like it might not be for a newbie, and it's definitely got some challenges, but you can do really, really well.
Hey there, I am Dr. Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast, where we explore the why behind success. Every week, I meet with real estate investors, veterinary entrepreneurs, mindset coaches, authors, and fitness professionals to uncover their why and how it drives them on the winding road to success. What is your why?
Hi everyone, I'm Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast. Today I'm here with Shawn DiMartile. Shawn embarked on his real estate journey in 2018. He was using the limited time he had off from working as a full-time air traffic controller and started diving into real estate at that point. Shawn, I'm first of all, thank you for coming on the show. I definitely appreciate you taking the time out today. And I have listened to your podcast, so I actually know a bit of your story, but I want you to kind of let the listeners know and tell them your background before we kind of dive in.
Absolutely. Well, Jason, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be on the show and tell everybody my story. So going all the way back, I used to be an air traffic controller. That was my trade. I did it for 5 years for the United States Navy. Then I got out of the Navy and served as an air traffic controller for the Federal Aviation Administration here in Southern California. And it was my dream job. It's a good career. And I was making good money, but I wanted to start investing to try and retire early. I mean, the air traffic control job is a good job, but it's a very high demand job. It's a job that you're working 6-day work weeks most of the time.
Wow.
The hours are shift work. So I would work evenings, mornings, and graveyard shift over a 5-day span every single week. And that was just really a grind on me. And I was realizing, man, I don't want to do this until retirement age. And so I started to read heavily, study early retirement, study everything I could to figure out side gigs or whatever. And I really kept landing on real estate as being the vehicle that I kept noticing people over and over and over again were able to quit their jobs and live off of that income. And so, fast forward after, obsessing over real estate for a number of years, I started looking for my first project. And I had 2 guys that I worked with in air traffic control at the time that were also like really getting into real estate investing. Some of them had already bought like their first rental. And we kept gravitating towards multifamily as being, the best asset class to scale. And eventually came up with the idea, well, why don't we all just put our money together and jump right into commercial multifamily and skip all the small stuff, stop looking for duplexes and fourplexes. So that's exactly what we did. And we actually, all 3, liquidated our 401ks to have even more seed money plus our savings. And we went and bought a 32-unit apartment complex just outside Indianapolis. And that was our first ever project. And there were definitely some growing pains, but we ended up doing really, really well. We ended up tripling our initial investment. And from there, we were kind of off to the races. We rolled out those into the next project. We started our own podcast, started our own local real estate meetup, kind of just checked all the boxes from everybody that, came before us and told us how to raise capital. And then we got a mentor. And then we started syndicating and doing some projects with our mentor. And, flash forward to today, and we have over 300 multifamily units, most of them out of the state of California. But, as of today, we are actually focusing on infill development projects in San Diego because they have these like unique density bonus programs that really attracted us and make sense. So kind of that's where we are today. That's the nuts and bolts in the 30,000 foot view.
Yeah, it's, I think something to touch on with that is, that you guys did that, went and got that first apartment complex. You all liquidated your 401ks. You kind of just went all in. And I think it's funny because there's so many people out there, especially right now in today's market, that are really afraid and sort of holding back from investing, whether that's actively or passively. But the real, one of the major keys to success, and your story tells that, is like, you've got to take action, you've got to do something. And you mentioned growing pains. It's not going to go perfectly.
Hmm.
Nothing goes perfectly, right? Like there's always going to be some level of challenges that you're going to face, but being able to, kind of just get in there and make a move, that to me is what's going to kick off success. And so I would, I wondered if you would maybe talk a little bit about that beginning for people that, because I think, a lot of people on the sidelines right now, but you jumped in. What things did you encounter? Maybe some of the challenges, how did you pass through them, that kind of thing?
So yeah, I mean, like I think for a lot of people, like what I did might not make sense. Like everybody's story is a little bit different. Like if, my story might be a lot different if I had a few kids at the time that I was doing all this and I'm maybe taking that kind of risk didn't make sense. But it was a really scary time. And I feel like every time I've made like a really big move or I've tried to do something bold, I was just like a nervous wreck and had all kinds of anxiety about it. And that, first project was no different. I mean, it was my life savings that I was putting at risk with no experience, really. I mean, like, we had read like every book you can imagine about multifamily investing and listened to every podcast we could. But it was really just one of those things where we said, well, you know what, screw it, we're going to figure this out and try to jump in and go right for the big stuff, right? I mean, some of the challenges, there was a number of them, but not going in properly capitalized was the biggest challenge we had. We thought with our underwriting and our projections that we had conservative reserves, and that turned out not to be the case. And we ended up actually running out of funds for the project and had to go and borrow more money from a private investor in order to complete the project. So I think, that it was a lesson for me that I've never forgotten. So now whenever I go into a project, I'm much more conservative in how much extra money we put on the sidelines. I do like really, really thorough inspections now prior to purchase if I'm going to purchase like a value add. And the reason for that is because that first project, we had things go wrong like, the drainage pipe that goes underneath our parking lot and, was responsible for draining most of the plumbing was a collapsed clay pipe that kept backing up. So we had to jackhammer the whole thing up all the way across the parking lot and replace that. And now have the inspectors scope each and every one of the sewer lines, as many as he can. I don't really like buying properties that old anymore. That first property was 1968 vintage and it had a lot of cast iron piping and things like that. And it's a money pit that is constantly breaking. So, for the most part, I'm not interested in assets that old anymore, and it would have to be in a very special circumstances that I would be. So, there was a million challenges that we faced, but I think at the end of the day, it still changed my life because we did really well. We ended up still repositioning the project. And I think that if you're listening to this and you're wanting to make the jump and you're really nervous and have anxiety about going into something without all your questions answered, kind of like you alluded to, Jason, you're never going to be 100% fully prepared for everything you're going to face. I just don't even think it's possible.
Yeah, no, you can try to anticipate everything, and I think, if you talk to the guys that have been doing it for 20 years, they've probably seen most everything. But even still, you're gonna get some surprises, you're gonna get some challenges. But the reality is, and you mentioned this, sort of being properly capitalized and having reserves. Like, I think it's a thing that a lot of people miss in the beginning, myself included, just where you're like, you need enough money to get the deal closed. And you're like, then I'll figure it out. And it's like, I think you talk to experienced operators and reserves is like a non-negotiable, right? You need to have some money set aside that is going to be there for those emergencies, because it not that money solves all problems, but in business and real estate, a lot of times you can solve the problem if you can get it done, taken care of, if you've got the money in reserves. It's just going to cause you a lot less anxiety. But what you do is you take these experiences and use them as learning lessons. And, like you said, you just mentioned a few things. I'm not going to buy older assets. I'm going to always make sure that, I have the drain scoped before I buy something. Like all of that stuff, it just gets compiled. And so one, if you never start, right, you're never going to have the outcomes you want. But also, if you never start, you're never going to learn those things, right?
Right.
You learn those things by having them happen. So I mean, a lot of that explains, your shift, and so you're now looking at, development in San Diego. So there's a couple of things I'm excited to talk about this, because there's one thing that the people especially love to talk about, that you can't invest in California and make any
Mm-hmm.
money, that it's the worst idea in the world, and don't do that, and you have to go to the quote unquote landlord friendly states, and it's just um, I think it's missing a lot of it's an overgeneralization and missing a lot of the pieces. So tell me a little bit about, kind of why you're focused there in San Diego, why you're focused on development, and sort of what that maybe tie in some of the experiences you've had as to why you made that shift.
So, there's a lot I could say about this, and you're right. You listen to Bigger Pockets, you listen to most people out there, most gurus, and a lot of the biggest guys don't want to invest in California. But also keep in mind that there's a lot of people still investing in places like California or Seattle or New York City or Miami or any of these really expensive primary markets on the coast, and they're still making a lot of money and really good returns. It's just a little more difficult for sure. Like, I would consider investing in a place like San Diego, the major leagues of real estate investing. Like, it might not be for a newbie, and it's definitely got some challenges, but you can do really, really well. So, kind of taking it back, initially, I've never been interested in investing in Southern California myself, mostly because I've been a value add multifamily investor. And admittedly, that's not my favorite strategy for Southern California, for a lot of the landlord tenant regulations. If you were to buy a value add multifamily project here in San Diego, it's really difficult to even underwrite for how quickly you can renovate the units, because at the end of the day, you can't just force somebody out of their unit if they're paying rent on time. Even if their lease is expiring, they automatically go to a month-to-month lease, and you can't just say, "Hey, I don't want to renew with you. You got to leave." You have to have a just cause for making them leave. Now, you can raise rent, to the maximum that you're allowed, and hope that they don't want to renew that way. But generally speaking, it's really hard to do a value add play here. And then obviously the landlord tenant laws and rent control just make it so hard that it's not that you can't get it done, but that strategy is more for somebody that's got a lot of money and can wait for that tenant to eventually leave.
Mhm.
So, all that to say, I've never been interested in value add multifamily here. And then came along San Diego's new policies for increasing density, which are the bonus ADU program. And I'm sure a lot of your listeners have heard of ADUs or accessory dwelling units. And then there's the complete communities programs. And those really respond because San Diego is basically ground zero for the real estate housing crisis. Home prices are the median home price is right at $1 million. Rents are some of the highest in the nation. But San Diego is also geographically constrained with the Pacific Ocean to the west, mountainous terrain to the east. Mexico borders us on the south, and then we have Camp Pendleton Military Base to the north. And really, all of the vacant land has been built on. So, what they've done is created a couple programs that will allow you to purchase a lot that could be, let's say, it used to be an old car wash, and it was a commercially zoned property that might allow you to have a perfect example is we have a project where the base zoning for that lot would only allow us to build 8 dwelling units on it. But with this new complete communities program, we can now do 20 units on that lot. Another great example is the bonus ADU program, where you can purchase a single family home, and depending on if it's in the right location, if it's a multifamily zone lot, etc., you can increase that density and put 8 to 10 accessory dwelling units in the back and essentially make it like a small apartment complex. And then a third example is one of our projects, we actually purchased 2 side-by-side houses less than a mile from the beach, and they're located on lots that can be upzoned using complete communities. So we're going to tear down both of those lots, combine them, and build a 30-unit apartment complex. Now, there's a couple advantages to this that I'll go through. Number one, This gives us the opportunity to build new rental units in neighborhoods that otherwise it's impossible to do that. So a good example is a 20 unit project that we're going to start construction on in a couple months that's 2 blocks from Sunset Cliffs in San Diego. And this will be one of only 5 new apartment complexes built west of Nimitz Boulevard in the past 20 years.
Wow.
So you're putting on new supply in areas that people desperately want a nicer apartment to live in. So you're able to capture really great rents. Another great thing is we're able to build these units for substantially lower than we would pay on a per unit basis to buy a value add multifamily close to the beach. So these units will cost us about $400,000 per unit to build. If I were to go buy a 1960s or 1970s building in the same neighborhood that has low rents with tenants locked in that are going to be hard for me to get out and there's rent control, I'm going to pay more than $400,000 a unit. I'm likely going to be paying $500,000 to $700,000 a unit. So my basis is lower building brand new. And then if you build brand new units in California, rent control laws don't apply to you for the first 15 years. So you eliminate that downside risk. And you're going to have a lower tax basis. So if I were to buy that same number of units on a building that was built in the 60s or 70s, my expense ratio is going to be substantially higher because as soon as I buy it, it's going to get reassessed for higher taxes. And then it's going to have a bunch of old components that I'm constantly replacing. So, with a new build for the first 5 years, you're going to have a builder's warranty. So most repairs are going to be covered by the builder. Your tax basis is calculated much less if you build because they're going to take it based off of the value of the land and then however much it cost you to build it, not how much the market value is for it. So as a developer, your basis is lower, tax basis is lower expenses. So there's just a whole laundry list of reasons why this became really attractive to us. And we believe that the window of opportunity for using these programs is going to be small. I don't think they're going to have these programs around for forever. So we're calling it the new California Gold Rush, to just build as many of these as we can in these prime neighborhoods while we can.
Yeah, and these are we're seeing similar things up in Los Angeles. It's people love to talk about how you shouldn't invest in California, and I think the reality is what you need to think about is there are just different ways to invest in different locations. It's not that you can't make money here. There's plenty of people making money in California in real estate. It happened right now, as you mentioned, like this is the way to do it. It's through ADUs. It's through new builds because of you don't have rent control on anything that's less than 15 years old, and so you can mitigate some of the issues that you would otherwise see in these older properties. And it's funny because when we talk about buying apartment buildings in other states, one of the big things everybody looks at is vacancy, and you don't want to buy, it's a distressed property if there's 10 or 20% is vacant. In California, you want it to be vacant. Those will actually be more desirable because you can, as you mentioned, you can go in and go ahead and implement that value add strategy right away. So it's just different. It's not bad to invest here. It's not problematic. It's just different. And so you just really outlined, kind of what people need to recognize about being a real estate investor is you identify the problem for your market, for your asset class, whatever it is, and you figure out the ways around it. And that's what you're doing there in San Diego. And I mean, the reality is it's the supply and demand part that you said, like, there is such a housing shortage nationwide, but like especially in these California cities, you're providing needed housing by if you're turning 2 houses into 30 units, like that's a big deal. That's helping a lot of people. So it's a really smart strategy. I love it. I think, that's what we're seeing a lot here in California right now.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right. It probably won't last forever, right? It's not going to be a thing that can just go on, but but if that changes, then you adapt and you find, kind of the next strategy that's going to work, and that's what it's about. And so I love development. I love the idea of building. You don't have to take care of,
Hmm.
there's not going to have all of that maintenance and repairs that you do on value add strategy. How did you kind of pivot into that? I mean, background as an air traffic controller. I know you've been in real estate for a number of years now, but I think getting into development is a little bit of a different animal, or maybe that's my own limiting belief, because I just keep telling myself maybe I'm not quite ready for that. But I do love the idea of just, sort of starting from scratch and building something new. How did you make that transition?
Yeah, good question. So, admittedly, my background and my experience is in value add multifamily outside of the state of California. So, what I did to kind of fill that gap on the lack of expertise in construction itself, construction management, understanding the development side of things, I just brought in other general partners and outside counsel to kind of fill that gap. And I really think that's what anybody should do. Like, if you in any strategy you're doing, if there's something that if you have a void in knowledge, you can always partner with somebody that fills that void, and that's usually the best partners. So, I brought in a guy, my buddy James Heinzman, that has worked as a commercial real estate project manager for his career, and he's an engineer. He's one of my general partners now that can, oversee and help work with the architect, engineers, understand the permitting process with the city more. I've also brought in third-party consulting agency that is an expert in these fields and can help consult me when it comes to the permitting process with my architect, et cetera. And then, as another example, like this 20-unit project by Sunset Cliffs, we've partnered with Katy Development, which is the most experienced developer in the coastal markets of like Pacific Beach and Ocean Beach here in San Diego. So, we're co-GPing with them. They're going to actually build the property because they're vertically integrated with their own construction management. They will manage the property. So I think, it just comes down to, getting the right people in the right seats and partnering with the right
Yeah.
people. And that's exactly what we've done. So until I've got, more experience under my belt managing a development project, I'm going to continue doing so. I mean, because you're right, development is an entirely different beast and much harder than value add multifamily. It is a harder strategy, but a more profitable one in a place like San Diego. San Diego, like you said, with the supply and demand issues, to put it into perspective for the listeners, on average, San Diego has 17 renters competing for the same apartment. It's the most competitive rental market in California right now. So, in places where you have that huge supply and demand imbalance, I think there's a lot of opportunities to build. And then there's other markets in the country. I think, even like Dallas might be one of them, where they put so many new units online that maybe starting a project right now wouldn't be the best idea. I don't know. So it just
Right.
depends on your market, your sub market. You really have to have your finger on the pulse of what's going on to be able to make those kind of decisions.
Yeah, it's so local because it's the news cycle, if you will, says, oh yeah, we have a ton of new supply coming online. This is sort of countrywide, a ton of new supply coming online right now, which is why, some of the rent growth has slowed. However, the the new construction permits are way down, again, in these, sort of large scale apartment complexes. And so in, 2025, late 2025, 26, 27, the expectation is that demand is going to be extremely high again, kind of throughout the country. And so we'll see another big uptick in rent growth. But this is where it's like people that just sort of blindly dismiss California as the place to invest, but that's happening right now.
Hmm.
Like that is what's happening, is people are building to fill this demand, and it's not going to get filled, right? So that's just going to, that, doing development here in California is currently, at least from the people I've talked to, like that is the best strategy we have right now, just
I agree.
for the reasons we talked about. So it just shows you that it's so local. And I think doing development, especially where you're kind of new to that side of things, doing it locally, one, you're in a phenomenal market for what you're doing, but two, it allows you to really understand like the local government dynamics and those regulations, and be right there to kind of, because I think what is such a big part of development is that side of things, like work, like once you're constructing, it's probably not that different than a value add strategy, but getting to that point where everything's approved and moving along is really where it takes a lot of knowledge. And I love that you pointed out, sort of bringing in outside partners, experts, people that can sort of fill the gaps in your knowledge while you're growing that side of your business is just a really smart strategy. So I think that's a great way to approach kind of anything, and makes inspiring for me, because like I said, I love the idea of getting into development. So it just means getting partnered with the right people. So is that what you see kind of as your main focus going forward, Shawn? Is sticking with this for at least as long as it seems like it's a good strategy?
Yeah, exactly. I foresee us like over the next, I'd say 5 years. I anticipate this being the primary focus. I mean, like no matter which way you shake it, I mean, even if you're a value add multifamily investor, it's gotten a lot tougher. We have 295 units in Greensboro, North Carolina. I've owned in Indianapolis. I've owned in those Midwest places, and it's not like it was 4 or 5 years ago. It's really difficult to be hitting high double-digit returns for investors. So even if you're a value add multifamily investor, trying to get over a 20% annualized return is super tough these days. Everybody's looking for the same thing, and there's not enough to go around. So I think that this development strategy, we've kind of found a little bit of a sweet spot too, because for one, the kind of projects we're focusing on are like anywhere from 10 to call it 40 units, which is too small for the institutional guys. The big guys that need 150, 200 unit projects is too small for them. And it's too big for and expensive for a lot of the typical investors breaking into the business, because, these, for example, like, one of our 30 unit projects is a $12 million project, for construction costs and everything. By the time it's done, it'll be worth around $20 million. So these are still really big deals for the smaller guys. So what that's put us in, I feel like, is a niche that there's not a lot of competition for the lots we're looking for, and there's not a lot of other guys doing it. One of our partners that we're co-GPing with even told us, they said before we came along, they were the only guys in town doing it in those specific neighborhoods. So I foresee us being able to continue doing this until my prediction being that in the years to come, eventually all of the NIMBYs are going to be able to band together and put up enough of a fight to get this changed again, and we'll be right back to square one. And if that happens, I'll be seeking the next strategy. I might go back to investing out of state. Who knows? But it's constantly changing here in California. And the one constant that will always remain true in California is you can never, ever trust the government in California. They will always change the rules on you. So 2 years from now, they can on a whim change the rules and say, never mind. Now all new buildings have rent control applied to them as well. Or, you're not going to be able to do this in these neighborhoods. Something like that's going to happen.
Yeah. What's your plan with these? Are you planning to hold them long term? Are you trying to, sort of build and sell? What's your strategy once the development's complete?
Once the development's complete, we're going to hold for a number of years and then sell with our investors. And that's largely just due to the fact that our investor base, they like to have the, 3 to 5 year time horizons for their investments. And we just don't have a large enough base of investors that are interested in a long-term, say, 7 to 10 year hold. Right. Which is a little heartbreaking when you go through all of the headaches in order to actually build a building like that, to then go and sell it. But at the end of the day, it's going to make the annualized returns better for investors, let them recoup their money quicker, and then go and put that into the next asset. So most of these projects are 5 year hold or less.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I think it's another worth pointing out here is just the, especially with development, there's a number of different exit strategies you could have, right? You can build and sell to someone who wants to lease it up. You can build it, lease it up, and sell it immediately after that. You can hold it for 5 years and sell it. You can hold it forever. I mean, there's just so many different ways that you can do with development that because you're there sort of at day one. So
Hmm.
I think it's a very smart strategy.
Thank you.
Shawn, let me switch gears. I want to get the chance to ask you the questions I ask every guest. The first one, of course, related to the name of the show being Know Your Why. What is your why? What's driving you? You're a young guy. What kind of pushes you forward?
Just freedom for me and my family. I've just been working and grinding so long, and it's funny because I'm 35 years old now, and there's people older than me listening to this, I'm sure, saying, "Oh, you think you've been working long?" But just the grinded in the Navy, grinded as an air traffic controller. Um, you know, for me, it's been having time and financial freedom, to where I'm not locked to my computer or my phone for work. And that's always been the goal. And then also helping retire my parents and bring some wealth to my family. And I haven't achieved that yet. I'm still on that road, but that's what gets me up in the morning. That's my why. I just want freedom. I don't want to have the majority of my life to be working. I want the majority of it to be in nature, outside, traveling, um, going fishing with my dad, all that kind of stuff. So it's what I think about every single day.
You live in San Diego, so you need to be able to get outside as much
Yeah.
as possible. It's a beautiful location. Tell us something about yourself that isn't common knowledge. Special skill, a hobby, anything to let people know you better.
So my favorite hobby, I guess I'll say, is backpacking in national parks. So, go to Yosemite, Sequoia, things like that, and go on like a 4 or 5 day backpacking trip with all of my food and everything I need in my backpack and going on like a 30-mile trail. That is my passion. That's really what I want more freedom to be able to do. I love it, and it gets me fired up.
Love it, love it. I do too. It's been a long time, but I really do enjoy it, and I need my kids to get just a little bit older, and then I can take them with me. But I'm
Oh yeah, that'll be fun.
the concept of just getting out there for a few days, just away from everything. You've got everything on your back. It's really nice.
Yeah.
Really nice experience. When people hear this and they want to reach out to you, what's the best place?
You could reach out to me a couple ways. You could try going to my website, which is takeoffcapital.com. Takeoff like a plane taking off, capital, capital.com. You can also email me directly, which is Shawn, SHAWN, at takeoffcapital.com. And you can find me on Instagram, which is Shawn_DiMartile. I'm sure the show notes will have you can spell my name, because you guys might not remember that one. But any of those ways, I'm totally cool with you reaching out. You can also reach out directly to my cell phone, which is 502-379-7292. If you want to just, pick my brain, get together. If you live in the area, anything like that, feel free to hit me up.
Awesome. We'll put that all in the show notes. Final question for you, Shawn. What piece of advice would you give to someone who wants to get started in real estate? No, you're not too far removed from that, but what's your thoughts in today's market, and kind of what would you tell them to inspire them to get going?
Man, I think the biggest piece of advice is to go to as many real estate events and meetups as you possibly can, and start to meet all the big players in your market, and become friends with them. Don't ask them if you could do a deal with them or anything for a long time. You need to build a rapport. So, find these people, keep going to their events, take them out to dinner, learn about the projects they're doing, and over time, try and find a way that you can provide them value, whether it's finding them deals or something like that, because that's going to be your foot in the door to get them to teach you one thing or another. I think that's always the best way to try and get ahead and get started. And then the second piece of advice I would give you is to network with as many people that are revolved around the strategy you're doing. So for example, if you want to build ADUs, talk to lenders and learn as much as you can about how they would lend on a project like that. Talk with ADU builders. The list goes on, but I would always remember there's a saying of never have lunch alone. So try to take people out to lunch or dinner as much as you can, And that is how you're going to get into those inner circles in your market. It worked for me. So I know it can work if you do it.
I've never heard that one before, but I like it. Just it's simple, right?
Yeah.
People talk all about your network. It's your network, but just never have lunch alone. You meet a lot of people that way. So
Yes, you do.
Amazing. Well, Shawn, thank you so much for coming on the show, sharing your story. I think there's a ton of success on the road ahead for you. So appreciate you taking the time out and coming to talk to us.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. I appreciate it so much. And again, if you guys are listening, you want to reach out, you can always reach out directly to me. But thanks again, Jason. This was awesome, man.
Yeah. And folks listening, I know you're going to love this episode. Please connect with Shawn, and please rate, and review the show so we can get more great guests. And thank you all for listening.
Hey there, I am Dr. Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast, where we explore the why behind success. Every week, I meet with real estate investors, veterinary entrepreneurs, mindset coaches, authors, and fitness professionals to uncover their why and how it drives them on the winding road to success. What is your why?